James Carter had just finished a talk at the Pineville Town Community Center, where he spoke about the importance of unity and racial equality. A tall black man with a confident demeanor and sharp yet gentle eyes. James felt proud seeing attendees, especially young black men, leave with smiles and a renewed sense of hope. He climbed into his car, an old but reliable sedan. It was the last gift from his father before he passed away. To James, the car wasn't just a mode of transportation but a symbol of perseverance and resilience. As he drove home, the sunset painted the sky in shades of red, and the peaceful atmosphere of the small town allowed him to momentarily forget the challenges ahead. But that peace didn't last long. As James drove through a quiet neighborhood, flashing blue and red lights appeared in his rearview mirror. His heart sank momentarily, but he quickly checked his speed, seatbelt, and paperwork. Everything was in order. He pulled over to the side of the road, staying calm. 2 police officers exited the patrol car. Leading them was Derek White, a middle-aged white man with a cold stare and commanding demeanor. Beside him was Kevin, a younger officer who appeared hesitant as he followed orders. "Step out of the car now," Derek barked, his tone sharp and oppressive. James slowly rolled down the window and raised his hands to avoid any misunderstanding. "Officer, may I ask what I've done wrong?" "Don't ask questions. I said step out of the car," Derek yelled louder, his eyes scanning James's car as if searching for evidence. James exited the car, maintaining a polite demeanor, though his eyes betrayed his disappointment. "This is my car, and I have all the paperwork to prove it." Derek ignored James's words. "We've received a report of a car matching this description being stolen in the area. You'll need to come with us to the station." James could feel the injustice weighing on him. He took a deep breath. "Officer, you're welcome to check my paperwork right here. I'm not trying to cause trouble, but your actions seem unreasonable." Derek refused to listen. He grabbed James and cuffed him behind the car, ignoring Kevin's visible unease. Passerby, noticing the commotion, began recording the incident on their phone, further escalating the tension. The video of the incident spread across social media within hours, quickly becoming a focal point for discussions about racial discrimination in law enforcement. The hashtag Justice for James trended widely, and human rights organizations immediately took notice. In Pineville, the atmosphere grew tense. In the town center, dozens of residents gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans like "Justice for James" and "End Racial Profiling." Meanwhile, James was released after a few hours without so much as an apology from Derek or the police department. He returned home to the support and comfort of the community. Neighbors visited to show their solidarity. "James, we're with you," said Mrs. Ruby, an elderly woman from the neighborhood. "You've done so much good for this town. We won't let them treat you like this." Though deeply hurt by the injustice, James chose to remain calm. He knew anger alone wouldn't solve the problem. "We need to act with reason. I believe in justice, and I won't let this incident deter me from my purpose," he said. A few days later, at a press conference, Pineville's mayor, Catherine Morgan, stepped up to the podium. After thanking the community for their commitment to justice, she delivered shocking news. James Carter was the newly appointed chief of police for Pineville. The announcement landed like a bombshell. At the police station, Derek froze as he watched the news on TV. Felt like a punch to the gut. How could the man he had falsely accused turn out to be his new boss? Derek stormed off to find Kevin, looking for someone to vent to. "Can you believe this? It's a joke. How could they appoint someone like him as police chief?" Derek fumed. Kevin looked at Derek, concern evident in his eyes. "Derek, maybe this is an opportunity for us to change. Maybe he's not the person you think he is." James's first day at the police station was anything but smooth. As he walked in, the white officers fell silent, their eyes filled with skepticism and a lack of respect. A few quietly snickered, whispering among themselves. James maintained his calm demeanor, He called a meeting with the entire force to address them. I know many of you doubt my ability to lead. I'm not here to prove anything, but to do the work. I believe we can build a fairer police force that serves everyone, regardless of race or social status. Derek stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, smirking. The only thought running through his head was, this guy won't last long. After the meeting, James didn't avoid Derek. Instead, he walked straight over to greet him. Officer White, I'm looking forward to working with you, James said, extending his hand. Derek returned the handshake with a limp grip. Yes, sir. I'll do what's required. But James wasn't one to be easily discouraged. He knew that change required more than words. It demanded action and patience. After a long and tense first day, James sat alone in his new office. His desk was nearly empty, save for an old photograph of his parents, who had always taught him about fairness and compassion. He knew this new role wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't anticipated just how hostile the environment would be. Elsewhere in the station, Derek White led a group of veteran officers who were openly uncomfortable with James's presence. Derek didn't shy away from voicing his discontent in private conversations. Did you see him? What's he here to do? Reform us? Bring fairness? Who does he think he is? Derek scoffed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Laughter of agreement echoed around him. Kevin, who often found himself by Derek's side, started to feel uneasy. He had seen James's determination and calm demeanor on his first day, though he didn't dare speak up. Deep down, Kevin knew James wasn't the person Derek made him out to be. James, for his part, remained vigilant. He observed every glance, every attitude from the officers around him. Though he was well aware of his isolation, he was steadfast in his resolve to implement reforms and transform the department into a place where everyone, regardless of race or background, could be treated with fairness and dignity. News of James Carter, Pineville's first black police chief, continued to dominate the media. Some articles praised his resilience and courage, while others cast doubt on his ability to lead. At a press conference, reporters crowded to ask questions. One senior journalist, with a sharp tone, asked, Chief Carter, what do you say to critics who claim that your appointment is merely a political stunt to appease the black community? James met the journalist's gaze directly, his voice calm but powerful. I am not here because of the color of my skin. I am here because I believe everyone deserves to be served and protected fairly. What I do will prove that. James's response garnered support from some, but it also fueled further debate. Small protests began to appear, both in support of and against him. The external pressures mounted, and James knew he was fighting not just for himself but for an entire community that had endured oppression for generations. One evening, James returned to his modest home in Pineville's south side. The house was filled with memories, both joyful and painful. He sat down on an old wooden chair and opened the family photo album. He thought of his father, Lewis Carter, a hard-working truck driver who had always taught James that no matter how unjust society might seem, kindness and determination were the keys to change. But Lewis's life was tragically cut short when James was just a teenager, in a suspicious traffic accident involving the police. James could never forget that night. His mother had broken down in tears at their doorstep. The police claimed Lewis had run a red light, but witnesses insisted that a patrol car had rear-ended him. The case was buried, and James's family never saw justice. That memory was what drove James to join the police force. He wanted to change the system from within, to ensure no one else would endure the kind of injustice his father faced. Yet now, surrounded by hostile stares at the station, James couldn't help but question whether he had the strength to make it happen. One morning, as James was reviewing reports in his office, an emergency unfolded. An armed group had attacked a major jewelry store in the town center, taking 2 employees hostage and barricading themselves inside. James immediately convened the special response team. In this critical situation, he had no choice but to assign Derek, who had extensive experience in armed standoffs. to lead the tactical operation. White, you'll lead the entry team, James said firmly. Derek hesitated briefly but couldn't refuse. While the team prepared, James decided to join them at the scene, despite objections from other officers. I can't just stand by. This is my responsibility, he insisted. The rescue operation was tense. The criminals were not only armed but had a clear plan to counter the police. Derek and his team approached the building from the rear, while James attempted to negotiate and buy time. A dangerous moment arose when one of the criminals spotted Derek's team and opened fire. In the heat of the moment, Derek leaped to shield his teammates, risking his own life. From his vantage point, James quickly directed reinforcements. Through coordinated efforts and bravery, the police managed to subdue the criminals without any further casualties. After the mission ended, James approached Derek. You did an excellent job. Thank you. Derek looked at James, feeling a mix of confusion and respect. For the first time, he saw James's determination and leadership as more than just empty words. Still, he said nothing, offering only a slight nod in response. The standoff with the armed criminals was not only a professional challenge but also a significant turning point in James's relationship with the officers at the station, especially Derek. Though he didn't say it aloud, Derek began to respect James after witnessing his calm and decisive leadership during the mission. Following the operation, James held a debriefing meeting to review and learn from the experience. He praised the outstanding contributions of his team while highlighting areas for improvement in coordination. When it was Derek's turn, James addressed him with a serious yet sincere tone. Officer White, I commend your bravery and quick thinking during today's mission. Your actions saved the lives of our teammates. I hope to see you continue to demonstrate that same spirit. James's unexpected praise left Derek feeling unsettled, unsure of how to respond. He simply nodded. Yet, deep down, another thought began to take root. For the first time, Derek started to question whether his prejudices about James had been fair. The calm after the operation didn't last long. A series of strange incidents began occurring in Pineville. Confidential police investigation details were leaked, allowing suspects in major cases to evade capture under mysterious circumstances. James decided to initiate an internal investigation, tasking the tech department with tracking information flows within the station. After several days of analysis, they discovered a group of officers within the department secretly collaborating with local criminal gangs. Among the implicated officers were some who had worked closely with Derek for years. When James presented the findings at an internal meeting, Derek erupted in anger. Chief Carter, I don't believe this. Those people are my colleagues. I've known them for years. They couldn't possibly be involved in something like this. James remained calm, but his gaze grew stern. White, I understand how you feel, but evidence doesn't lie. We can't let a few bad actors destroy the integrity of this department and the work of the entire team. Reluctantly, Derek agreed to cooperate with James on the investigation. Together, they devised a covert plan to monitor and catch the rogue officers in the act. James and Derek's plan unfolded over the course of a week. They orchestrated a large-scale sting operation to expose the rogue officers. The location was an abandoned warehouse identified as a meeting spot for the corrupt officers and a local criminal gang. On the night of the operation, James, Derek, and a fully equipped tactical team silently approached the area. Tension filled the air as they received confirmation that the suspects were on site. Derek led a team to flank from the rear while James oversaw the operation from the command center. As the corrupt officers were in the middle of their transaction, Derek signaled for the team to move in. The takedown was intense, with gunfire echoing through the dark night. One of the rogue officers spotted Derek and lunged at him. In a dangerous moment, Derek was shoved to the ground. But James arrived just in time, firing a shot at the attacker's leg to neutralize him and save Derek. Both the rogue officers and the criminal gang were apprehended, bringing the operation to a successful conclusion. As the chaos subsided, Derek looked at James. his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Carter. You saved my life." James simply smiled. "We're teammates. It's my responsibility." News of the successful operation quickly spread throughout Pineville, bolstering the community's trust in James. He had not only proven his leadership but also reinforced fairness and transparency within the police force. At a community meeting, James was invited to speak. Hundreds of residents from different neighborhoods gathered to show their support. "James, you've done what we thought was impossible. You've changed the way we see the police department," an elderly woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. James stepped onto the stage, his voice steady and clear. "I couldn't have done this alone. Today's success is thanks to the support of all of you and my team. But this is just the beginning. We must keep working to build a community where everyone feels safe and respected." After the meeting, Derek unexpectedly approached James. This time, he extended his hand not out of obligation but out of genuine respect. "Carter, I was wrong about you. You're the leader we need." James shook Derek's hand, his eyes filled with hope. "We still have a lot of work to do, right? But I believe that if we do it together, we can make real change." The relationship between James and Derek officially turned a new page. From initial prejudice and mistrust, Derek now saw James not only as his superior but as a true teammate. Following the successful operation and growing recognition from the community, James Carter began tackling one of his most critical tasks as police chief, reforming the Pineville Police Department. He organized a large meeting, inviting all officers to attend. As he stood at the front of the room, the eyes of every officer were on him. While skepticism lingered in some, others began to sense the seriousness of his mission. James addressed the team, his voice steady and resolute. "We've seen the issues in this system for years, but I believe we can change. Our job is not just to arrest criminals. It's to build trust with our community. I'm introducing a new training program focused on fairness, equality, and conflict resolution without the use of force." Some officers exchanged uneasy glances, their dissatisfaction evident. One stood up to ask, "Chief, do you really think these reforms will work? We don't want to waste time on training sessions just to appease public opinion." James responded calmly, "I'm not asking you to change overnight, but I am asking you to be open to learning and listening. We're doing this not only for the community but for ourselves, so we can take pride in the work we do every single day." At that moment, Derek, whose perspective had shifted, stood up and spoke. "Chief Carter is right. I used to doubt what he was doing, but I've seen how he leads. If we don't change, we'll be the biggest obstacle to safety and justice in this town." Derek's words took many in the room by surprise. A few officers began nodding in agreement, and James's reform program officially moved forward. James knew that for his reforms to truly succeed, he needed to build strong relationships between the police and the community. He organized meetings between officers and residents in every neighborhood. These conversations took place in community centers, schools, and churches, where people could openly express their thoughts and concerns. At one such meeting, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins, who had lost his son in an incident involving the police, stood up and spoke. "I used to think all of you just protected each other and looked down on us. But I have to admit, Chief Carter, what you're doing has changed my perspective. I can't forgive right away, but I'm willing to give this a chance." James was moved by his words. He replied, "Mr. Jenkins, I can't erase the loss you've suffered, but I promise to do everything in my power to make sure no one else has to endure that kind of pain." Derek, who had accompanied James to the meeting, listened quietly as they left the community center. He turned to James and said, "I never thought conversations like these could matter. I used to believe our job was just about catching criminals. But now I see that trust is the most important thing." James smiled and patted Derek on the shoulder. "We're on the right track, Derek." The changes initiated through the community meetings began to show tangible results. Reports of conflicts between the police and residents dropped significantly. Even some officers who had initially opposed the reforms started recognizing the value of building trust. James pushed the program further by organizing a peace festival in the town center, where police officers and residents participated together in activities like sports competitions, cooking events, and art performances. During the festival, James stood on stage alongside Derek and several other officers. He addressed the crowd. Today, we are not police officers or civilians, not black or white. Today, we are a community, working together to build a better future. This is just the beginning, and I need all of your help to make it happen. James's words were met with thunderous applause. Derek, who had once stood in opposition to James, now felt a deep sense of pride standing beside him. The shift in Derek's mindset extended beyond his work, influencing his personal life as well. Derek decided it was time to confront his family, particularly his father, Martin White, who had always held deeply rooted racist views. One evening, Derek returned to his parents' house for dinner. During the meal, Martin didn't hesitate to express his dissatisfaction. "Son, I've heard you've been working pretty closely with that Carter guy. I don't understand how you can lower yourself like that." Derek set his fork down, looking directly at his father. "Dad, Carter is the best leader I've ever worked with. Do you know he saved my life? Do you know he's doing everything he can to fix the mistakes we've always accepted as normal?" Martin's face reddened with anger. "Don't let those black guys fool you. They just want to take everything from us." Derek took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Dad, I used to think like you, but I was wrong. If you don't change, you'll never see the truth, and you'll never know the kind of man Carter really is." The conversation ended in tension, but Derek knew he had done the right thing. He was no longer afraid to speak the truth and stand up to those with misguided beliefs, even if it meant challenging his own family. The morning after the Peace Festival, the sun shone brightly over Pineville, signaling a new day and a fresh beginning. The laughter and joy from the previous night's celebration still echoed in the hearts of the people. As James walked through the streets, he felt a renewed sense of hope. Residents greeted him with smiles and looks of genuine trust. In his office, James received a letter from Mr. Jenkins, the man who had lost his son in an incident involving the police. The letter read, "James, yesterday's festival made me realize something important. I can't change the past, but I can contribute to the future. I'm ready to participate in the discussions you've been organizing, and I believe we can accomplish something great together." James was deeply moved, knowing that reconciliation wasn't just about his personal efforts but also the collective will of the community. Inspired, he decided to expand the scope of his reform programs, aiming to spread the message beyond Pineville to neighboring towns. With the support of members of the police department, particularly Derek, James organized a regional workshop involving officers, community leaders, and residents from nearby towns. The workshop became a landmark event, drawing national media attention and shining a spotlight on Pineville as a model for change and unity. The workshop provided James with an opportunity to share his story. During the opening session, he stood before hundreds of attendees, his eyes filled with determination. His voice resonated through the hall. "My journey didn't begin here, in this position, but with the injustices my family and I once faced. I'm not here to criticize but to build. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it to create a better future." James spoke about his father, the instances of discrimination he had endured, and the reasons that drove him to become a police officer. He didn't shy away from addressing the flaws in the system but emphasized the capacity for people to change. His speech left the room in silence. Some shed tears, while others rose to give a standing ovation. Derek, sitting in the front row, couldn't help but feel proud. He leaned over to Kevin and whispered, "Do you think we're lucky to have him as our leader?" Kevin nodded. "I have no doubts anymore." In the days that followed, discussion sessions were held, bringing residents and police officers together to share their stories and brainstorm solutions. The relationship between the two groups improved significantly, not just in Pineville but in neighboring towns as well. Derek White was no longer the man he used to be. The prejudices and hostility within him had gradually faded, replaced by a passion for his work and a newfound respect for everyone. He actively participated in every training program James organized, becoming one of the most dedicated advocates for change. One day, Derek received a phone call from his father. "Martin." "Derek, I want to talk," Martin said hesitantly. Derek returned to his parents' home and realized that his candid conversations had made an impact. Martin, though not entirely changed, began to acknowledge that he might have been wrong in his perspectives. "Son, I don't know if I can completely change the way I think, but I see the good work you're doing, and it makes me proud." Derek felt as though a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He knew change wouldn't come overnight, but this was a promising start. At the police station, Derek became a model officer, someone his colleagues looked up to for guidance. He not only carried out his duties but also mentored younger officers, helping them understand the importance of fairness and respect in their work. 2 years later, Pineville was a completely different town. Reports of violence and racial discrimination within the police force had dropped to their lowest levels in history. James's reform programs had been widely adopted, and he was invited to speak at events across the country. One spring evening, James stood on stage at a major event in the capital, where he was presented with an award for his contributions to social justice. Standing before thousands of people, he felt as though all his efforts had been worthwhile. Today's success isn't mine alone. It belongs to those who had the courage to confront their mistakes, like Derek White, who proved that change is possible. It belongs to the community of Pineville, who never stopped supporting and believing in us. And most importantly, it belongs to everyone who believes that fairness is not a privilege but a fundamental right for every human being. After the ceremony, James returned to Pineville, standing atop a hill overlooking the transformed town. He gazed down at the quiet streets bathed in moonlight. He spotted Derek leading a group of young officers on patrol, officers who James knew would carry forward the values he had worked so hard to instill. James smiled, his heart full of hope. He knew that, despite the challenges, the journey had been worth it. Pineville was no longer just a town. It was a symbol of hope and change.